Welcome to Mind and Soul Matters. We're delighted to share with you again another special presentation from a live forum. It is part of a series of live talks organised in collaboration between Mind and Soul Matters and Melville Baha'i community to discuss issues around mental health in our society. I will leave the introduction of our presenter to Dr. Dina Ashurian, MC of the forum. Enjoy this very interesting and informative presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dina, and I'll be your MC this afternoon. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting today and recognize their continuing connection to land, sea, and community. We offer our respect to their elders, to their culture, to the elders past, present, and emerging. I'd like to acknowledge Relationships Australia, as well as the Melville Baha'i community for sponsoring today's forum. Today's event is part of a series of mental health and well-being forums where we explore relevant topics with the help of expert panel members. Baha'i communities all over the world are working to engage in social discourses on topics that are impacting our communities and our society at large. We are all here to grow in understanding of the mental health crisis facing our nation and how we can recognize and respond if faced with these challenges. Today's forum has a focus on the topic of family and well-being. Family well-being is likely to cover a number of elements. For example, physical and mental health, relationships, financial and housing security, connections to wider society, and the personal well-being of individual members of the family. Good family well-being can be understood as having a balanced combination of all these aspects, being resilient to changes in these elements, and ensuring that all individuals can benefit and contribute to the well-being of their family unit. Speaker is Dr. Veronica Anderson. Veronica previously practiced as a veterinarian with a professional focus on the welfare of animals used in research and in education. Now retired, Veronica's passion is the welfare of children and the importance of the role of parents in nurturing holistic development in children to enable them to independently navigate the opportunities and challenges of adult life and to contribute to the welfare and betterment of their societies. Additionally, in the same arena of child welfare, Veronica is the West Australian Baha'i Child Safety Officer. So welcome, Veronica, and I'll pass the floor to you.
Thank you, Dina. When you asked me to talk about family and well-being, before thinking about spiritual parenting as such, I was thinking about what does a family that enjoys well-being look like? And you did allude a bit to that, the physical aspects, but I guess from our perspective, I would like to kind of maybe focus more on the emotional aspects of family well-being. So to me, a family in well-being or enjoying well-being is one where everybody feels it's a safe space to be. So everybody feels valued, everybody feels respected, everybody feels heard. It's somewhere when things are not going well, you know you can come home to, regardless of how old you are. And you know that all the other members of the family are going to kind of emotionally be behind you. Even if they might not agree with what you do, emotionally they're still going to be behind you. So it's that sense of security that I guess that a family that enjoys well-being has. And so the thing is, how does this spiritual parenting, which is one of the courses that the Baha'is offer, how does that help a family to get to that position? So we come at it really more in terms of the course being an opportunity to help parents to bring out those spiritual qualities that all their children have. So there is another Baha'i quote that says, "Regard man as a mine rich in gems of inestimable value. Education alone can bring forth these treasures." So these gems are our spiritual qualities. Every single baby is born with these gems in potential, in the same way a seed of an acorn tree, for example, has within it, very uninspiring when you look at it to begin with, but in fact, if it grows to its true potential, becomes this enormous tree. And you can't see, if you cut up the little seed, you can't see any of the bits of that tree that it will become. But you know that if you plant that and you water it and you give it enough sunshine and you protect it from the wind, you fertilize it, basically, if you nurture it properly, it will grow. And if it looks like it's, tending to kind of grow a bit crooked, you prop it up with a stick, you tie it for a little while, and then when it doesn't need the stick, you remove the little support and off it goes. So that's kind of, in that sense, that's what spiritual parenting aims to do. We aim to try to give parents the tools that will help them to bring out those spiritual qualities in their children. And I guess there are 5 sessions in it. The first session is about using the language of the virtues. So if we acknowledge when we see a virtue, then the child thinks, oh, yes, I have that virtue. So if they're being very patient and even though they're being hungry, they don't whine and go, where's dinner? I'm hungry. You can say, thank you for being so patient. And if they say, what is patience? Because obviously the first time you use a big word, nobody's going to know what it is. You can say something like, it just means to wait without complaining. So then they get the message. So you can use big words, and if we introduce these words to them, they suddenly begin to think, I have that inside of me. And the more of these virtues that you can acknowledge in them when they display them, the more their child is going to think, oh, I have all these qualities. And like anything, all of us want to have good qualities. All of us want to be kind of acknowledged for, being patient or being kind, sharing our toys, all those sorts of things. So that, just by using the language, just by acknowledging our children for the gifts that they are displaying, we are actually promoting their self-esteem. We're helping them to think, we're raising their self-awareness of the gifts that they possess. And at the same time, we're helping to build their self-esteem. So their self-esteem is then not built upon something like, oh, that was such a good job, even if it wasn't a job. If you get a sticker, but you really didn't do that great a job, but you sometimes do get stickers because everybody gets a sticker, that kind of doesn't really make you feel as good as when you know that someone is saying that you've done a good job because you really have done a good job. So I guess it's that. And then that actually makes me think about truthfulness. So we're trying to teach our children all these things. And if for some reason they're not displaying one of these qualities, again, rather than having a go at them for why aren't they being quiet or whatever it is that you want from them at the moment, we call them to a virtue. We try to get them to see that they have the ability to be whatever it is, to demonstrate the behavior that we're looking for. So if they're being really rowdy and really noisy and interfering with adult conversation, so you have guests, you can say to your child something like, can we show some consideration because we're talking? Would you like to play a little bit more quietly? Perhaps get a game that isn't quite so noisy. Something like that. But it encourages them then to use that gift of playing peacefully or showing consideration. So, and again, when they do that, the important thing then is to acknowledge, thank you. You are being so considerate now that we can actually hear each other, So I guess the thing to remember is that our words have the ability to have a positive impact, to bring out the behavior that we want and to build their self-esteem. Or if we use them in a negative sense, like you were talking about, it has the ability to crush their spirit. So they're fearful of being unloved, I suppose, in a way, if they see that you're upset with them. So the language that we use really imparts to our children how we're feeling about them. It might be their behavior, but they sometimes are not able to tell the difference. They just think that you don't like them, but not that you are not happy with their behavior. So anyway, so it's about the language. Then the other thing we investigate after this is about the necessity for boundaries and how we go about setting boundaries that are both a blend of discipline, but also a loving discipline. And then when people break boundaries, because all of us do, all of us in our lives, we all make mistakes. and there will be consequences. You know, you fall off a chair and you hurt yourself. It's a natural law. It's consequence. So, but if we can explain to them that these are the boundaries, and then when you break these boundaries, that these will be the consequences, then children kind of feel safe because they know that there's this safety net around them and that they're not going to hurt themselves because you've put in place things to protect them. When we're talking about boundaries, it's always really helpful, the art of consultation, so family consultations. That's another way of making sure the family has well-being, because one of the things we want to make sure is that everybody in a family has the right to be heard. So as a form of respect, everybody gets to have a say, everybody gets to be heard. Doesn't mean that the parents are going to do what the children want or suggest, but at least they get to have a say. So, you know, even with things like consequences, especially when children are older, I guess things like curfew, what time do you think curfew should be? What do you think if you break that curfew and you come back, you know, if you have a sort of 9 o'clock, you've got to be home, and you show up at 11, what do you think the consequence should be? Those sorts of things. For teenagers, you can discuss these matters in a family consultation so that they then feel as though they've had input into the consequence. And that way they're also far more likely to not get angry when that consequence is imposed upon them because they've been part of the discussion about getting there. Some of the other things in another session, we talk about parents as role models, because obviously children from all the way up are basically always watching their parents. Children will do what their parents do, not so much what their parents say. So if you tell your child, you know, you can't tell lies, it's bad, you have to always be truthful, you always have to be honest, we all tell our children that. But then if we turn around and when someone rings up that we don't want to speak to, we say, tell them Mummy's not at home. You know, like what exactly are we trying to tell them? I mean, what the children learn there is hypocrisy. They don't learn that honesty or truthfulness is important. So we have to make sure as parents that what we say to them, the behavior we want from them, is also the behavior that we ourselves are displaying to them. And then a very important part is connection to the sacred, because what we want all of our children to be able to do when we and their brothers or their partners are not around as they're adults, is that they have to be able to go inside themselves, connect to some deeper aspect of themselves, and know that in themselves they have the tools to overcome most forms of adversity. Certainly not the break your bones type. I mean, if somebody hits you, that might be something you couldn't avoid, but how you react is totally within your capacity. And so what we're trying to do there is to teach them to connect to the sacred, if you have a faith, and to connect with God. And if you don't, well, to connect with the higher self that is within you. So first you have to recognize that you have a higher self, and then how do you learn to connect to that? Meditation, prayer, you know, walking in nature, a whole heap of stuff. So we investigate all those things. The other thing that we talk about in this course is how do we companion our children? How do we not counsel, because that is not the right word, but companion our children to find their own answers. So if they have a problem at school, it's all very well. When they're very young, sure, we can step in and we can help them. But as they are growing up, what we need to learn to do is to teach them how they're going to manage these problems when they arise in their future lives. All of us have problems. But if someone's always rescuing us, then we never really learn. And then once we're not there and the rescuers have left, what do we do? So in that part of the program, we're trying to help them to find their own solutions, talking through it, asking them, so how does it feel? What do you think? Is there a virtue you think? That sort of way, but always coming back to these spiritual qualities. The whole thing really is about the foundations, the pillars, finding these pillars and then acting on them. And if you think about it, service is another big thing, I guess, that we also need to teach our children, that a lot of happiness comes not just by trying to make ourselves happy, but by helping others, by being of service to community, by being of service to our partners, our brothers, our sisters, all that sort of thing. By being of service to the family, what can I do in the family that will make this family stronger, more united, more secure, happier, all those sorts of things.
Thanks so much, Veronica. I'll put a little plug in because my children are now adults, but I struggled with my own parenting. And, when we have children, we don't have an instruction manual on how to parent. And of all the courses and books that I took myself to, I found the spiritual parenting course was the most helpful for me. And I did it a number of times at different points in my children's lives. So it is a fabulous course, and it does change the whole culture of the family when you learn those strategies. So friends, this is now time for our Q&A, our question and answer time. So if anyone's got any questions, now is the time for any of our panelists.
My question is, how do you think in terms of cultural relationships? How do you establish, sustain and maintain cultural relationships? People migrate from we talk about parents and husbands and wives, work, etc., etc. So you're running programs and all of that stuff. How do we set up something, and how do we manage all these ideas that you have in terms of cultural relationships? And people come from different backgrounds to Australia, and there seems to be a wider and wider gap, as you see what's happening in the United States, etc. And people have been there for hundreds and hundreds of years. So the question is, which principles that you talk about do we use, and how do we use it when there's already a barrier?
I think if we deal with every person, regardless of what culture they come from or regardless of what they look, if we kind of imagine that, for example, we can't see, if we just kind of close our eyes, and what we're actually dealing with is just another human being. So I guess for me, it would be relating to each and every human being, regardless of what culture or anything, with those qualities of respect, empathy, consideration, understanding. I think if we bring those qualities to any relationship, we should be able to navigate those we should be able to kind of navigate those relationships. And I guess it's hard because these days, there are pressures of race, color, religion. But if we operate out of the principle of this just the spiritual quality of respect, it really shouldn't matter what race or culture. Really, that's what we're trying to also teach each other, really, and teach our children, is to operate on that using those basic principles. Because I think if we did all that, all the problems of the world really would disappear, because we'd also treat each other with justice, and we wouldn't have poverty, and we wouldn't have discrimination. And all those really come fundamentally down to using these spiritual qualities. And of course, we have to acknowledge that everybody has them, so we're all the same. You kind of have to start off with that at least. There was one other thing that I forgot to mention, and that was families, this family well-being thing. Families are the basic unit of society. I mean, if you discount individuals, but in terms of relationships, which you were talking about, it's within the family that we learn how to relate. It's how we relate to males, how we relate to females, how we relate to elder people, how we relate to younger people. So if you think about it, relationships and everything about relationships is learnt in the family. And at the same time, obviously, prejudices are also imbibed in the family. So if we can get the family kind of sorted, if we can all do the right thing within our family, then kind of by extension, everything else follows slowly. I mean, I'm not expecting miracles, but I think that we have to kind of look at what's the best path forward, and then take the first steps, admitting that it'll take a few generations to get to to make a noticeable difference. But still, we have to start.
A very big thank you to Relationships Australia for co-sponsoring with the Melville Baha'i community, and thanks to our fabulous panelists.
If you found today's episode useful, remember to share an episode with a friend and follow Mind and Soul Matters on your preferred podcast platform and on social media. Look forward to your company next time on Mind and Soul Matters.